Okay, so this week we're going to start looking at actually doing the tests in SPSS. I've got open here the paper that we looked at with the perceived stress before and after doing an online mindfulness course. And then we'll have a look at the data that is available with the paper through BMJ Open. Now the graph they've given here, we can try and reproduce this in SPSS, so we can see the drop in the perceived stress scores before and after doing the course. They've just put the labels in 1, 2 and 3, but really before, after and follow-up would probably be more useful labels. And because we're just going to look at doing a simple t-test with two groups, the before and the after, we'll just be looking at these two scores here. Now the scores are paired because they had one group of people, they all did the intervention and they had a measurement from each person before and a matching measurement from each person after. It looks like there's a big drop from the graph, and we know that it's significant from looking at the paper, the paragraph describing it. However, I think this graph would actually be more useful if they included the confidence interval on these scores as well. So let's have a look at doing that. So if we open up the data, now this has just been imported straight from the Excel spreadsheet, so there's no codes or labels on anything which you can go through and add for yourself. We're just interested in the stress pre-doing the online course and the stress after doing the online course, and there's a whole lot of other variables you can see that they've collected as well, which you might be interested in exploring. If we go to the graphs, now it would be probably useful to do a histogram of the pre and post scores, and I'll leave you to do that yourselves as you've probably done them quite a bit already. What I'm interested now in is that graph that had the means in them, and I want the confidence intervals too. So that's under this bar area and the simple error bar we want. So drag that in. Now I'm just going to take that out. Okay, so we're back to the blank graph now. So we want the stress pre, drop that into the y-axis, and we also want to compare that with the post. So grab the post and just hover it over the top until you see the plus sign, and then that will add it in as well, and click OK. Now as we're not actually doing the test yet, we can just drop the follow-up one in as well if we want to. But really we're interested in those first two. Now over on the side here it says it's going to plot the mean for us. So this is not plotting all the data like it would with a box plot, it's just plotting the mean, and it's giving us some error bars. Now I would like to keep it as being the confidence intervals, but you could also plot the standard error, and some publications will plot the standard error. They usually don't plot the standard deviation, but it's always a good idea to read the description that comes with a graph just to check which thing has been displayed. Okay. And here we get the similar graph as what they had in the publication, and you could muck around with that to make it more like the one in the paper if you wanted to. So we can see from here that there is absolutely no overlap between this confidence interval and this confidence interval. So whatever the true population level of stress was before, we imagine that it's going to be different to what this hypothetical true population value of the stress after would be. Now we can test this and get an actual p-value. To do that we need to go to Analyze, Compare Means, and you can see here we've got a few versions of the t-test depending on what we want to do. So if you want to compare one column of values against a single value, so if you wanted to test that the overall stress in the population was equal to, I don't know, 20 on this particular scale, then you could test that. If you had two separate groups doing the test and you wanted to compare their stress levels, then you could do an independent samples t-test. And that's not what we've got here. Here we've got paired samples. We've got the same group of people did the stress test before and after doing a course. So that's the two. And then there's also the one-way ANOVA, which we haven't looked at yet in the readings, where you've got more than two groups. So we want the paired samples t-test, and it's quite simple. Click on it. I'll take these out so you can see where I got them from. So stress pre, click the arrow. Stress post, click the arrow, and that's it. Click OK. So we have a fair bit of output here. We've got these mean values, 23.7 and 14.4, And that's what we saw in the graph here, 23.7, 14.4. Sample size is 100. Standard deviation, standard error of the mean. Now when we come down here, what it's giving us, this mean here is the mean difference. So it's done this, the pre-score minus the post-score, and the average difference in the scores is 9.29. So that means on average the stress for the participants has dropped about 9 points on this scale after doing the online mindfulness course. Now we've got the confidence interval for the difference. We've got our test, which is the test statistic here, and the degrees of freedom, which we haven't really covered because we're not really doing the maths behind the test. And what we're interested in is the significance, two-tailed, and that's our p-value, 0.000. So we've got very strong evidence against the null hypothesis, and the null hypothesis for the t-test is that the means equal in the population. So we've got very strong evidence from our sample that the means are not equal in the population, and that is what they reported in their results.